The forests of Appalachia harbor many secrets, but few are as intriguing as the legend of a creature the German settlers called the Snallygaster, or quick ghost. For centuries, it stalked these mountains, leaving behind tales of a predator that seemed to defy categorization, a beast with a metallic beak, wings like a dragon, and extending from its mouth, something witnesses could only describe as writhing tentacles. Descriptions like these could easily be dismissed as the product of fear, folklore, or outright hoax. Yet, as my research has revealed, the truth behind this creature is far more remarkable than any legend. What follows is a full examination of the Snallygaster's biology, and what we've come to discover about the mysteries that still lurk in the shadows of our scientific understanding. The story of the Snallygaster truly begins in the mid-18th century. As German immigrants settled in the Appalachian region, they brought with them a history of rich folklore, including tales of what they called the Schnellgeist, or fast ghost. Originally, the term described a spectral entity known for its swiftness and ability to disappear without a trace. Yet it wasn't long before the name was applied to something no one in their new home could explain. The first documented account dates to 1735, when a farmer near Frederick County, Maryland, reported a great bird swooping upon his livestock at twilight. The creature, he claimed, was unlike any known predator. It had wings like a dragon, a metallic sheen to its curved beak, and a size that dwarfed even the largest birds. Within weeks, similar reports emerged from neighboring homesteads, describing livestock stolen or dismembered, and claw marks gouged deep into fences and barn doors. Fear of the Schnellgeist spread rapidly, and farmers began to take protective measures. Six-pointed hex signs began appearing on barns, intended to ward off the creature. Still, sightings persisted, with many describing the creature as terrifyingly swift, intelligent, and seemingly unbound by the laws of the natural world. As the years turned into decades and cultures became merged, the term Schnellgeist transformed into a new name for this creature, the Snallygaster. But it wouldn't be until the early 1900s that the creature's legend would reach a fever pitch. In 1909, multiple newspapers across Maryland and beyond published vivid stories of this creature. Farmers described hearing unearthly screeches in the night, and one family claimed to have seen it alight on their roof, and strangely described it as having an eye in the center of its forehead. It was even alleged to have killed a man, piercing his neck with its sharp bill and draining him of blood. The creature allegedly plagued the region for some time, as it was sighted again and again flying overhead and disappearing soon after. But the legend gets more bizarre still. In that same year, the creature was reportedly flying near Frog Hollow in Washington County when it was lured by the potent aroma wafting from a 2,500-gallon vat of moonshine. As it grew closer, however, the fumes overwhelmed it mid-flight, causing the beast to plummet directly into the boiling mash. Shortly after, revenue agents George Dansforth and Charles Cushwa arrived on the scene, having been tipped off about the illicit distillery. What they found, however, was not exactly what they'd expected. They saw a grotesque and lifeless creature submerged in the bubbling vat. Stunned by the sight, the agents acted decisively. Fearing the implications of their discovery, they reportedly detonated 500 pounds of dynamite beneath the still, obliterating not only one John Barleycorn's moonshine operation, but also the remains of the Snallygaster. Conveniently, it seems, this explosive conclusion left no physical evidence of the creature behind. And so it was that our investigation began where these stories left off. As we would discover, Frederick County is home not only to the legend, but many fragments of documentation, newspaper clippings, personal journals, and cryptic letters that indicated one simple thing. There was more to the story. To uncover the truth, we would need to sift through a century's worth of myth and fragmented evidence. The official story, as we have seen, claimed that the creature's remains were destroyed in an explosion. However, certain discrepancies in the reports of certain revenue agents drew our attention. Primarily, entries in the personal journal of one of the agents suggested something else entirely, though several crucial pages appeared to have been deliberately removed. Our inquiries in the local community were met with an all-too-familiar mix of reticence and misdirection, and this pattern of deflection continued as we interviewed other descendants of those involved. Each seemed to dance around any definitive claims, and we suspected a deeper truth, especially as we uncovered additional documents, including a series of letters between local officials that spoke of preserving certain evidence for future examination. Our long-awaited breakthrough came when we discovered a series of old property records. The Winters family had maintained ownership of a small parcel of land near Frog Hollow, seemingly worthless rocky terrain that had been carefully passed down through 3 generations. The deed itself appeared unremarkable, and in all honesty, this wasn't much of a lead. But I had a hunch that I simply couldn't shake. After some deliberation, we decided we had little choice but to explore the area for ourselves. In the interest of time, I will say simply that nestled deep within the forest on that plot of land, we discovered an abandoned root cellar, largely obscured by decades of accumulated natural debris. Inside, preserved in a thick layer of salt and wrapped carefully in burlap, we found our specimen. The preservation was crude, yet it had been remarkably effective. The creature's basic structure remained largely intact, though severely desiccated. Marcus insisted on full protective gear before handling the remains, though my own excitement nearly got the better of me. Even through the deterioration, it was clear that we were looking at something else entirely undocumented, in the scientific world at least. Suffice it to say, the local reaction to our discovery was immediate and complex. Within hours, several residents had gathered near the cellar, their faces a mix of concern and what I can only describe as relief, as if some long-held burden had finally been lifted. Little did we know the depths of their secret. Planning expeditions to the far corners of the Earth isn't easy, and it takes a lot of time. And whether it's for that reason or another, even though it's one of the most important things we can do, sometimes we just don't have the time or mental energy to plan and execute a delicious, home-cooked meal. That's why I'm genuinely excited to share something that has made my life much easier and more interesting: HelloFresh. Now, you've probably heard about it before. It is America's #1 meal kit after all, but you haven't heard about it from me. Cooking at home is supposed to be enjoyable, but between planning tonight's dinner, grocery shopping, and measuring out ingredients, to me it often feels like it's more work than it's worth. And too often I find myself resorting to something easier and far less satisfying. But that's where HelloFresh comes in. Each week they deliver fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your doorstep along with simple, step-by-step recipes. No guesswork, no wasted food, and best of all for me, no racking your brain for what to prepare. For example, last week, my wife and I made something we probably never would have thought to make otherwise, chosen from HelloFresh's more than 50 dinner options: black bean and green pepper burritos with pico de gallo and cilantro lime rice. And we made almost all of it from scratch by ourselves. It took us about 30 minutes, and this was the result. I said over and over again how it felt like it came straight from some expensive restaurant. Eventually, she said, "Yeah, I get the idea, but how could I keep quiet?" Every bite tasted like accomplishment. And right now, HelloFresh is offering a fantastic deal: free breakfast for life. That's right, one breakfast item included in every box for as long as your subscription is active. I don't know about you, but I'll take a bonus meal any day. And by the way, not only will you get an amazing deal and delicious food, your subscription to HelloFresh genuinely supports this channel and allows me to continue making videos like these. So click the link in the description or use my code POTATOJAN10 to get 10 free meals and free breakfast for life. Again, that's one breakfast item per box while the subscription is active if you're in the US. Outside the US, the local discount will apply. But whatever you do, don't miss this chance to make your mealtime simpler, tastier, and way less stressful. Now, let's get back to our expedition with our minds focused and our stomachs full. The creature laid out before us in that earthen cellar looked, at first glance, like something that might have stalked the Earth millions of years ago. Something like a theropod dinosaur. Yet, as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized that certain aspects were wrong. The proportions weren't quite right, at least when compared to any dinosaur fossil I'd studied. No, this was something else entirely, and for now, I have named it Tentacularaptor appalachianus. Even now, the creature defies easy classification. Though it did appear to be derived from theropod stock, this species had moved far beyond that ancestral form. The specimen measured 14 feet from beak to tail tip, with the tail accounting for nearly half that length. Standing, it would have reached roughly 6 feet at the shoulder, with powerful hind limbs supporting what we estimate to be a mass of roughly 800 pounds. Its limb morphology clearly indicated adaptations for both climbing and terrestrial movement, with particularly robust forelimbs spanning nearly 5 feet when fully extended. The entire frame was draped in a complex covering of scales and feathers, arranged in patterns that likely aided in camouflage. The skull terminated in a curved keratinous beak, from which emerged a highly unusual feeding apparatus, something like a tongue, but quite different. We'll return to that momentarily. But perhaps this specimen's most distinctive feature was what appeared to be wings. From behind each shoulder blade, a fan-like membrane extended, covered in sleek aerodynamic feathers. Each membrane spanned nearly 4 feet from base to tip, creating an impressive total wingspan of approximately 9 feet. These structures were quite unlike the wings one might imagine, and certainly unlike those of birds or bats, more comparable to the gliding membranes of a Draco lizard. In proportion to body size, these membranes were actually quite modest compared to other gliding vertebrates, suggesting that they may have served as much for display as for aerial movement. In fact, much of Appalachianus morphology seemed at first to be one of chimeric juxtaposition, but while further analysis would reveal a creature of remarkable overall adaptation, that first bizarre impression would remain, and it would extend far beyond the creature itself. In terms of our examination, we were at first at a loss as to where to begin, but after cataloging the specimen's physical appearance, we chose to start at the logical place, the head. The skull's most prominent features were large orbital cavities, positioned for what was likely excellent forward vision, a trait essential for judging distances when moving through dense forest canopy. The size and shape of these orbits means that Appalachianus likely possessed excellent low-light vision, while pronounced olfactory bulb impressions in the skull indicate a well-developed sense of smell, both of which would have bestowed upon this creature an impressive ability to track prey through thick vegetation. Overall, the head was covered in thick skin with raised bumps and adorned with feathers most prominently in the dorsal region. Posteriorly, the skin transitioned to scales near the jawline, while anteriorly, its texture stopped abruptly at a dense, keratinous beak. The beak was smooth and quite prominent, and its presence certainly explains many accounts of a creature with a metallic beak. Its surface showed a pattern of wear and growth similar to modern raptors, though considerably more robust, and deep muscle attachment points along the jaw indicated tremendous bite force. But beneath this formidable beak lay what is arguably the creature's most unusual feature, a modified tongue unlike anything previously documented in modern biology. The preserved structure revealed multiple, almost finger-like projections, and looking at it, you could certainly be forgiven for thinking the creature possessed a mouthful of tentacles. The tongue extended greatly beyond the oral opening when fully extended. And unlike the relatively simple muscular organ found in most vertebrates, this structure branched into a total of 4 forks, so to speak, beginning about halfway along its overall length. Like most animals, this structure is anchored in the hyoid apparatus, a series of bones dorsally attached to the skull and ventrally to the larynx. These bones provide basic support for tongue movement and swallowing. Here, however, it appears that the hyoid bones have developed into a much more robust framework, specifically in regards to enlarged attachment points for powerful muscles that run the length of the tongue. And X-ray analysis revealed a surprisingly intricate internal architecture. Throughout the main body of the tongue and into each projection, specialized fascicles of muscle fiber ran in multiple directions, longitudinal bundles for extension and retraction, circular bundles for precise control, and oblique bundles allowing for complex, twisting movements. Dense connective tissue bound these fascicles together while presumably maintaining great flexibility. In fact, the overall arrangement greatly resembled the muscular hydrostat system seen in elephant trunks, wherein multiple layers work in concert to provide both strength and precise control. Of course, in order to support these complex arrangements, equally complex innervation would also be necessary. And that is precisely what we observed. Numerous dense nerve clusters ran throughout the tongue structure, with particular concentration at the base of each projection, an extensive neural network that suggests incredible sensory capability, and which likely allowed the creature to gauge pressure, texture, and movement with extraordinary precision. Like the tongue of a chameleon, this organ was clearly capable of retracting into the mouth cavity when not in use, the projections folding together as the muscles contracted. However, where a chameleon's tongue relies on projectile force and sticky secretions to capture prey, the tongue of the Snallygaster appears designed for subduing mechanically. The strong muscular attachment and branching structure would have allowed it to not only snatch prey, but grip it firmly, pinning down struggling victims while the powerful beak delivered killing strikes. Interestingly, examination of the large curved talons on both fore and hind limbs indicate signs of wear consistent with frequent climbing, suggesting that the creature may have frequently hunted from elevated positions. In fact, its hunting strategy likely combined multiple adaptations. As previously described, the large orbital cavities indicate that the creature may have been most active during dawn and dusk, when prey would have been active, but visibility still poor. The tongue, capable of reaching out, grasping, and manipulating prey, would have allowed the creature to capture food from positions and angles that would otherwise be inaccessible, effectively expanding its hunting domain beyond what its size might suggest. Finally, the robust musculature of the neck and shoulders suggests that the creature was capable of lifting considerable weight with its tongue and beak combination, potentially taking prey up to the size of a deer or sheep. This would align with historical accounts of missing livestock, though smaller prey was likely more common. And of course, many of those same accounts reported a flying creature, and that was where we turned our attention next. As we have seen, initial examination along the creature's flanks revealed large, feathered structures. But as we carefully documented the specimen, something far more unusual emerged. These weren't wings in any conventional sense, and almost certainly weren't used for true flight. Instead, they appeared to be a rather sophisticated gliding apparatus. The core of this structure originates from highly modified scapulae, which had become broad, triangular supports, each capable of extending upward and outward from the body. When deployed, they formed rigid, sail-like projections covered in specialized feathers that radiated outward from the central support. The preserved membranes showed evidence of strong muscle attachments at their bases, which indicates that the creature had precise control over their deployment and positioning. As stated previously, the overall structure bears more resemblance to the gliding membranes of a Draco lizard than to the wings of birds or bats, though the addition of feathers and the unique shoulder blade support make it quite distinct. Though the presence of these gliding membranes may seem quite strange at first glance, they are not without precedence in the fossil record, even beyond the Draco genus. Similar gliding mechanisms consisting of a patagium or plate flanking the torso have been found in Weigeldosaurids of the late Permian, the Triassic Queniosaurids, and the Cretaceous Xianglong. Of course, none of these were nearly as large as in Appalachianus. In any case, the presence of these wings helps explain centuries of sightings. When folded, these structures lay flat against the creature's flanks, but when extended, they would have formed an impressive display that could easily account for the dragon-like descriptions. We've seen that Appalachianus likely often hunted from an elevated position. This would allow it to deploy its gliding membranes to move silently between the trees, using its prehensile tongue to snatch prey from branches or from the forest floor below. And the fact that these structures are derived from shoulder blades rather than limbs is particularly fascinating. I can't help but wonder how much further such an adaptation might progress under different environmental pressures, or given enough time. It is perhaps worth noting here that during our examination of the internal chest cavity, between the ribs we encountered a pair of unusual glandular structures, each roughly the size of a clenched fist. At first glance, we thought they might be specialized lymphatic or endocrine tissue, but closer inspection seems to indicate that this is not the case. In fact, these organs contained multiple chambers, lined with what appeared to be secretory cells, and a network of ducts led toward the throat region. To me, the complexity and preservation of these structures indicates that they served an important biological function, though their exact purpose remains elusive. It could be that they serve some kind of chemical production or processing capability, but without living specimens to study, we can only speculate about their true role in this creature's biology. And in truth, the more we learned about this specimen, the more questions arose in all of our minds. Indeed, the multitude of Tentacularaptor appalachianus unique adaptations raise many questions, especially in regard to its history. As I said before, I believe that the creature's basic body plan, the bipedal stance, the three-toed feet, the overall skeletal architecture, strongly points to theropod ancestry. Yet somewhere along the line, this lineage split and underwent a significant departure from its relatives. Of course, we know that several types of theropod dinosaurs survived in North America well into the early Paleocene, including along the Appalachian Range. But it seems clear that this species' overall structure bears strong similarities to a particularly unusual family of theropods, the Therizinosauridae. These bizarre dinosaurs have already challenged our assumptions about theropod evolution in numerous ways, having departed dramatically from the typical carnivorous form. Perhaps most interestingly, these creatures are thought to have been primarily herbivorous, possessing longer necks, broader bodies, and distinctive enlarged claws. but the similarities between therizinosaurid anatomy and certain features of Appalachianus suggest that perhaps this kind of anatomical revision wasn't entirely unique. It's possible that when dense forests replaced the more open environments of the late Cretaceous, certain traditional theropod hunting strategies proved less effective. While some populations followed the therizinosaurid path toward herbivory, others, such as our specimen, developed entirely new approaches to predation. The ability to navigate through thick vegetation, to strike from above, and to snatch prey from places a large predator couldn't normally reach would have provided significant advantages in this new world. And this could certainly explain Appalachianus' most distinctive adaptations. The species' gliding apparatus would have allowed it to move efficiently through its three-dimensional forest habitat, while the specialized tongue granted it hunting capabilities that more than compensated for any reduction in pursuit speed. Instead of following the common path of modifying limbs for aerial movement, as seen in pterosaurs and birds, it is astounding that these gliding wings preserved the forelimbs' functionality while granting limited aerial capability. Indeed, Appalachianus is an exhibition in how the basic theropod body plan could be modified in ways we haven't imagined. I'm left to wonder if isolated populations of early theropods could specialize in such unique ways, what other forms might have emerged in different environments? Could it be that this specimen, hidden for so long in the Appalachian wilderness, represents just one branch of a much broader radiation? Perhaps time will tell. After completing our examination, we carefully resealed the specimen and returned it to the Winters family. Their ancestors had preserved this remarkable creature for decades, protecting not just the physical remains, but also the truth of its existence. Of course, the fact that such a large specimen has been so well preserved indicates that Tentacularaptor appalachianus survived well into the modern era. But the rapid development of the Appalachian region during the Industrial Revolution likely placed immense pressure on any remaining population. The dense, unbroken forests they relied on were increasingly fragmented by mining operations, logging, and human settlement. Undoubtedly, a creature this size would have required extensive territory to hunt and survive. Looking at satellite imagery of the region today, one can still see pockets of habitat that might support such a species, remote valleys and ridges where the forest canopy remains intact. But these areas are increasingly isolated from each other, and while the reports of unusual creatures still emerge from the Appalachian wilderness, few in recent decades could match the distinctive features of Appalachianus. In short, the question of the species' current status will likely remain unanswerable, though it does weigh heavily on my mind, particularly as I prepare my report for the company. I suspect that very soon the Winters family will receive a visit from individuals with more official capacity than my own. Perhaps this is inevitable. Progress demands documentation, preservation, and proper storage. And yet, something will be lost when this creature leaves its mountain home for the last time. The modern Appalachian region, though still rugged in places, bears little resemblance to the unbroken forests that once allowed Appalachianus to thrive. The few remaining tracts of old-growth forest exist as islands in a sea of human development. If any of these creatures do remain, they face a world increasingly hostile to their survival. There is a certain irony in how this story has unfolded. Revenue agents claim to have destroyed this creature's remains to protect their true mission, the enforcement of prohibition. The locals, in turn, preserved the specimen to protect something they felt was far more important, the knowledge of something truly extraordinary. Now, as I prepare my report, I find myself part of another kind of concealment. The Winters family protected this creature's remains for generations, maintaining a delicate balance between preservation and secrecy. I can't help but wonder if our form of preservation, clinical, sterile, locked away in climate-controlled storage, might simply be another kind of destruction. The old sigils that still mark local barns were meant to ward off this creature, but perhaps they serve another purpose now, marking places where truth and legend intersect, reminding us that some mysteries are perhaps better left in the shadows of these ancient mountains. Thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video, and to viewers like you. If you'd like to explore more of the world of the cryptobiologist, consider visiting my World Anvil page at the link in the description. And remember, you matter.